over.
Right.
Bob Daniel had come up through the ranks, and Harry liked Bob Daniel. Well, he liked a lot. He liked a lot of folks around the place, but he thought Bob Daniel was an interesting guy, and therefore, when Jerry moved on, again, that was the first thing that happened in the new year. He found he didn't have a job here, and Bob Daniel took over as executive vice president for 6 months before he became president.
Somewhere near now, Jack McKenna departed too. Right?
Yes, Jack McKenna departed fairly early on. Yeah, he was sad that he hadn't been chosen to replace Wes Kurt. Yeah, it was Wes Kurt. He thought he should have, and therefore he went off on his own and led a very successful career, and which I think still goes on to this day. He's a what do you call a temp CEO. He comes into companies that want to see, just fired the CEO and they want somebody to come, just run one while we're finding a new one. Yeah. But originally when he left here, he went to, I think, what was the Harris Corporation, which I believe a component or instrument supplier to this company I'm not very familiar with. He was there for a good number of years and had a good life. But eventually, it's a family-owned company. I know there were some issues there, so he eventually went out and became a CEO temp. But he went fairly early on in the game. So
Bob Daniel was executive vice president for a period.
For a period, and then he became president. It was about 6 months. Harry wasn't going to get ahead of himself, and therefore he made Bob Daniel executive vice president run the place. And Bob Daniel assembled around him basically a team to sort out the problem.
Get the Black Hawk in production.
Yeah, get the Black Hawk in production, start making some money, and he did that again. Daniel released a lot of talent around the place who knew how to do that. Jim Dunn by then had come and gone. Jerry had brought in some interesting people from outside. But of course, the most interesting one he brought in was, I remember the blank. The friend we were talking about earlier.
Gene.
Sorry. We're going to sort out this with the tape, aren't we? So he brought in Gene. He brought in Gene as head, I think, of production control. Now,
I didn't realize that. So Jerry Tobias brought in Gene Buckle.
Yeah, he also brought in somebody called Dick Abington, which we haven't mentioned. Dick Abington was, for a brief spell, was VP in charge of the strategic planning department, and fortunately he got moved up to Hartford in the strategic planning role up there, and that's what actually physically created the space for me to fill in.
Nice.
Dick Abington was an interesting guy. He was a Marine Corps pilot who had been selected for the space program. But anyway, Jerry brought in Gene. He knew Gene. Who's the big company in San Diego?
Roar. Yeah.
Gene came in from Roar. Right. Gene was in charge of production control, and whereby Sikorsky was very good at foreign body rejection. He really didn't like people coming in at the top level from the outside, did he?
I think that's true.
Because Sikorsky is an interesting culture. It's very easy going at one level. You have to, if you work for Sikorsky, you have to prove you're useful, right?
Sure.
And it doesn't really matter what level you're useful, but you have to be useful.
Yes, sure.
And once you can get away with murder.
Once you're here, put the years in.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the number of people brought in the VP level had enormous difficulty in proving they were useful.
Well, Jerry Tobias, I remember, brought in a lot of.
Yeah, right.
They had like 6 months duration.
That's right. Like where did he go? Oh, well.
And organization chart changed once again.
That's right. Well, you may remember the organization chart was in the conference room in the executive suite, and all the names were on magnets on a metallic board.
Yeah.
Because one of the methods of driving Al Poole stark raving mad was to move him 2 inches down the board between meetings. And it used to drive Al stark raving
bonkers.
I mean, it was fun to do. Al was another great guy. You ought to talk to him. I mean, Al's a real good guy. I mean, a real good guy. I just talked to him. So there it was. Now, the only other interesting part of my career, I suspect, was once the Black Hawk was well in production, the word went out that we had to sell it overseas. Now, being the Brit around the place, that led me into contact with Westland. Now, Westland had been a really good licensee of Sikorsky for many years. It started immediately after the war, when Westland at that time was a builder of good fixed-wing, mainly naval aircraft, and they knew once the war was over, that game was basically over. They were too small a company to really be a big player in that game. And it is my belief they had had some contact with Igor prior to the war. I once found a source which hinted strongly that there was some thought in Westland that they should build a Sikorsky flying boat. And their contact between the two companies before World War II, but it never went anywhere. But anyway, at the end of World War II, the then chairman of Westland says, well, the future is helicopters. So, and if you're going to do helicopters, you've got to go to Sikorsky. So let's go and see our friends at Sikorsky. And they took out a license. I think the first license was for the S-51, which they called the Widgeon, they rebuilt. And, you know, it went model after model. I think every one of them they did after that. And obviously the last one they did was build a whole bunch of Sea Kings for the Royal Navy and sell them over. They were a very, very, very good licensee. Now, the hope, obviously, inside Sikorsky was that they would choose to be a licensee of the Black Hawk. And I was one of numerous people involved in numerous conversations with them. There were two problems with that. The most basic one was the British Army didn't want the Black Hawk. It didn't fit in operationally with their needs. There is a very fine distinction in the British military system as the Air Force operates the larger helicopters and the Army is only allowed to operate the smaller helicopters.
So the Black Hawk was too large?
It was probably too large, and it didn't really fit the British Army squad size. It really didn't fit. But perhaps the bigger problem was over the period we're talking about, all the British helicopter assets, company assets, have been folded into Westland under some Labour government. It's always been consolidated. So they had taken over people like Fairey and Saunders Rowe, and there was somebody else there. So they acquired them. So Westland was no longer just one English helicopter company. It was the helicopter company. And B, it had acquired some real design assets. Instead of just being a licensee, it had acquired some people who had designed things like basically the Lynx. The Lynx. That was all designed by Sarah. There were some real design engineers. Therefore, it sort of added those two things together and says, basically, we don't want to be no stinking licensee. We want to go off and do our own thing. We think we're big boys. And by golly, if Sikorsky can launch the S-76, we can launch the WG-30. Well, they launched the WG-30. Now, you have to remember, Westland never did anything with its own money. It always did it with the government's money. It was always well backed up. But of course it did the W-30 because it had to with its own money. And of course it also believed much of Sikorsky's forecast of just how many helicopters are wanted in that market.
That's believe it.
That's right.